All right, everyone, welcome to the first video for the Parallel Society's YouTube channel. For those of who are unfamiliar, a parallel society is a society that develops along the mainstream society and with time can replace it. So think of this as a peaceful revolution, a peaceful transition to something better. In future videos, I'm going to go over a lot of the problems that we have in our culture that need creative solutions. But for this video, I want to start off with something that I'm really passionate about, and I think that speaks to the problem and the solution at the same time. What we're dealing with now in our culture is this idea that all right, this is take 2 on the first video for the Parallel Society's YouTube channel. For this video today, I want to jump right into some solutions. A parallel society is a society that develops alongside the mainstream society with the goal of eventually replacing it. It doesn't have to necessarily replace it. We have parallel societies in the forms of the Amish or some immigrant communities that just live alongside the mainstream American or Western society, and they do just fine. But I'm seeing a lot of problems, and I'm sure you're experiencing a lot of these things in your life, whether it be inflation, political turmoil, breakdown of the supply chain. And I think that it's time that we now seriously think about what we can do to make the world better in an apolitical way, meaning that we're not going to rely on the political systems that have gotten us into this situation. These are topics that we can delve into in a future video, but for this video, I want to talk about something that I'm really passionate about, something that I've always wanted to do, and I think that really aligns with the idea of a parallel society. And that has to do with starting sustainable communities. If we're going to build a parallel society, the most important thing, the absolutely most important thing, if it's going to be self-sufficient, if it's going to really be able to stand by itself, is that we have to produce food. We have to have clean water. We have to have clean air. We have to be able to produce food. And I think one of the best ways to go about that, if you can see my screen right now, I have the Wikipedia page for permaculture pulled up. If you're unfamiliar with this term, I'm just going to review it a little bit right here. We're going to talk a little bit about how permaculture, design science, and things along those lines can give us a absolutely amazing foundation for building a new civilization, a new culture that does not have a lot of the issues inherent in our current culture, whether that be environmental, whether that be political, etc., etc. So permaculture is an approach to land management and this settlement design that adopts arrangements observed in the flourishing natural ecosystems. So this is a design science. It's not a blueprint. It's a way of thinking about dealing with land in such a way that the land is healthy, that it promotes life, it promotes abundance for humans, but also for other animals. I'm not one of these people that think that the world is going to be destroyed by climate change anytime soon. There's no doubt that we are having an effect on the environment around us. To what degree, I don't know, but I do not think that the solution is political. I think that the solution is individual and is going to be built around small groups. In California, where I live, we've been dealing with droughts. We've been dealing with a sinking water table, meaning that we have less underground water reserves. And permaculture and design science is a way that we can directly deal with this. And one of the things that's really important and it's really cool is that if we develop our agricultural communities around the watershed, and let me actually pull that up right now. I'm going to pull up what a watershed is so that you can get an idea. A watershed is an area of ridge, an area or ridge of land that separates water flows to different rivers and basins. So let's look at some images of that. As you can see here, starting from the mountains and the ridges, the land is broken up into where the water drains. If you can get a piece of land that has one of these drainage basins, you can control the water supply. And if you can control the water supply, you can control soil building and soil fertility. And that means that you can control food production. So what would be better for a self-sustaining community than a piece of land where you have fresh, clean water, a piece of land where you can build soils deeply, which sequesters CO2 out of the atmosphere, sticks it in the ground so that the soil is now rich, it's dark, it looks like chocolate cake. That's what you really want from an agricultural soil, whether you are raising animals, cattle, sheep, pigs, chickens, whatever, or you're growing crops. So that is the foundation, I believe, of a parallel society. Now, the cool thing about watersheds is that they're fractal in nature, meaning that a ridge has valleys in a drainage basin, but those valleys and drainage basins are also constructed or composed of ridges and smaller drainage basins. So it's not that you need to get a massive tract of land to accomplish this goal. You could probably do this with a smaller tract of land. And I think that the ideal size would be somewhere between 150, 300, 450 acres. That would be a really great size for a community. Does it have to be that large or that small? No, it doesn't. But that would be ideal. And the reason that I say that that would be ideal is because when we're trying to create a parallel society, we're also trying to create a society that's ideal for human beings. And I can't remember the name of this term, but there's a term, and maybe you guys can put it down in the comments if you know what I'm talking about. There's a term for the number of human connections, deep human emotional connections that we have, and it's around 150, 200, somewhere around that number. So that's the number of people that we can have these deep human connections with. And the thing that's really missing from our culture and our society today is the lack of these deep human connections. Let's look at one of these watersheds real quick, and then I'll piggyback on what I'm talking about previously. You have the ridge line here. Let's see if I can make this bigger. Let's see, just zoom in. All right, so you have the watershed divide. On this side of the line, on the left side of the line, the water goes one way. On the right side, it goes another way. It's draining. So water, precipitation is going to drain through this watershed. And the goal of good design is to slow that drainage down so that it gets into the soil and is stored in underground aquifers for later use. What'll happen is you do some earthworks, that is moving the earth around, massaging the landscape in a sustainable and profitable way so that the water soaks into the ground. And then what will happen is further down the slope, you will get springs popping off where you can capture that water, put it in a pond, raise fish, use it for irrigation. There's so many cool things that we could do if we had this access to land. And the cool thing about this is that it's not a political thing. We don't need politicians to do this. We could buy land as individuals or groups and start our own communities. Now, I'm not for this completely shutting ourselves off from the world type of thing. What I really would like is for self-contained communities that still communicate and interact with the wider world. So I am not a isolationist by any means, but I do believe we become more resilient if we have communities that can produce their own water, or at least store and conserve their own water, that can produce their own food, that can, as individual communities, improve the environment by sucking CO2 out of the air, sticking it into the ground where it can be used to increase fertility, hold more water. A really fun fact, for every how can I say this? For every bit of carbon that you have in your soil from the sequestration of CO2 from the air, you can store 4 molecules of water. So that means that you can store a massive amount of water in the soil if there is carbon to lock it up. That means that that's water for plants to use. That means that you don't have to irrigate as much or at all, depending on the circumstances. Let's delve into this a little bit more. So we talked about permaculture. It has some lofty ideals, and in large part, it's been co-opted by left-wing hippie crowd, like the left-wing hippie crowd. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with, well, maybe I am, but that's a topic for another podcast, another video. It's been co-opted, all right? It's become something that it wasn't intentionally meant for. My understanding of permaculture is that it was a capitalistic enterprise, a way of developing the land so that it's profitable, but also sustainable and does well for the individual, but also does well for the community, right? So you're not just destroying the land by monocropping, growing all the same thing. You're not overgrazing. You're doing things the right way so that future generations can benefit from your labor, your effort, and your stewardship of the land. All right, Keyline Design is one of the things that inspired permaculture, and it's huge in and of itself. It was developed by a man named P.A. Yeoman in Australia. It is a way of looking at the landscape and finding where you can store water in the highest practical spots in the landscape. And then you can also do a certain type of plowing that allows water to infiltrate into the land better, to build soils and to make ridges, the areas that normally are very dry in the landscape. You can hydrate them. So you're going to move water from the area, the valleys to the ridges with a proper type of earthworks, which involves a type of plowing. This is not a plowing where you're turning the soil over. It's used what's called a subsoiler. So it's really cool what this guy came up with. And his motivation for coming up with this was that I believe it was his brother or brother-in-law died in a grassland fire. So he was thinking, how can I make my land fireproof? How can I make it flood-proof? How can I make it drought-proof? And he came up with this idea called Keyline Design. let me see if I can pull some stuff up where I can show you examples. Let's see, Keyline Cloud. Go to images. For all of its evil doings, Google is convenient. All right, so this is like a Keyline subsoiler. Let me just pull this up. You can see it's a shank that goes under the ground, and it basically will rip these airways through the soil that allow plants' roots and water to infiltrate. And so your plants have more space for their roots to grow, and water can percolate deeper into the soil. And you do this plowing in a certain pattern, which helps to build soil. But like I said earlier, also helps to make it so that the ridges, areas on your land that are normally dry, it helps to move the water from the wet areas, the areas that may be too wet, the valleys, to the ridge. And this is done through the Keyline Design system. It's also a system of pond and dam building. So I'm just giving a really brief overview of what's possible with this Keyline Design. Uh-oh, freezing up here. Okay, here we go. The guy who created it, P.A. Yeoman, I pulled up a picture. This is his farm. You can see that he has all of these interconnected ponds, right? So he can use these ponds to raise fish. He can use these ponds to irrigate his lands. He can also use these ponds to put out fires on his land. And so they're all interconnected, and it's all about having water move through your landscape as slowly as possible before it leaves your land. And that has a whole host of benefits. I mean, you're going to be able to grow plants, you're going to be able to raise animals, wildlife is going to be able to thrive in this type of situation. So this is smart stewardship of the land. Another technique of permaculture is the swale. This is a tree planting method where you dig ditches on contour and you plant trees downhill. The idea is that as the water rolls down the hill, it gets stopped by this level ditch and the water soaks in, and that allows the trees to thrive, but it also rehydrates the landscape. It also builds up our aquifer so that if we have wells and we need to take water out of the aquifer, we're going to be replenishing it on a regular basis. Another technique, which is actually pretty similar to a swale, is terracing. And here are some just beautiful, beautiful pictures of the effect that humans can have on the landscape that's actually beneficial. So you're going to make these flat step-like features on the land. And there are periods where it's more appropriate and less appropriate, depending on the land, depending on your soil type. But this is something that you can do. There's a guy by the name of Sepp Holzer. I think he's out of Austria or Germany, something like that. Look him up, Sepp Holzer, Seppholzer. And he is just like the permaculture king. He's like permaculture godfather. He didn't even use the term permaculture, but his techniques and his farms so embodied these ideals that they asked him to start using the label, or if they could use the label when referring to him. But one of the cool things he does with terraces is he'll create a series of terraces, and at the bottom he'll dig down to the impermeable layer of clay, and he'll lay some pipes and he'll make artificial springs. So the idea is that water soaks into these steps on the landscape, and then as it hits the impermeable layer of clay, it's going to slowly slide down the landscape. It filters the water, and then the water can be collected to produce a source of water. So you don't have to worry about municipal water. That's amazing. You don't have to worry about this municipal water. And again, if we're building a parallel society that's truly self-sufficient, we're going to need water, we're going to need soil, we're going to need fertility, we're going to need food, we're going to need community. These are the things that we really need to be successful. Let's look at a few other things. I wanted to bring up rotational grazing. I think that cattle or animals are really important. Though, despite what we hear from the vegans, we really need animals to be sustainable. The way that we raise animals is the problem, not the fact that we have animals. And so there's this idea of paddock shifting or rotational grazing, where you move animals from one piece of land to another. And let's see, I just pulled this image up, or this website up for the images. Let me zoom in a little bit here. So here you see continuous grazing. And this is actually really bad for the land. It will deplete the grasses, as the cows will just eat whatever they want. And as soon as something pops up, they eat it. Rotational grazing, you have some sort of fencing, it's usually electrical, and you move from one paddock to the next. And by doing this, the cows eat everything relatively evenly, and then it gives the other paddocks time to rest and regenerate. So if you do this continuously, you get this building of soils, you get this building of fertility. It's great for the animals. They produce a very high quality food source, and it's also great for the land. It's great for the pastures. Much better, by the way, than growing crops, because, and I want to be fair, unless you're doing a no-till operation, which is very can be very challenging in certain circumstances, you have to till your soil regularly, and that causes all sorts of problems. It kills everything, right? It kills all the plants. It kills all the bugs in the soil. The microorganisms get fried by the sun. You want your soil always covered with something growing to make sure that it's healthy. And so when we till our soil regularly to plant a crop, whether it's corn, wheat, soy, whatever, that is very destructive to the ecosystem. And it is actually what is responsible for the Dust Bowl. So we tilled so much, we burned off all the organic matter in the soil, it causes a bunch of erosion, and now almost nothing will grow. So that's not to say that you can't ever grow crops, but it has to be done in the right way. And rotational grazing with ruminant animals, that is cows, sheep, things like that, is ideal for a lot of land, and it will help to deal with the climate problem or the CO2 problem. I'm doing air quotes. I know you can't see me, but I'm doing air quotes because I'm not so sure, based off evidence, based off what I've heard, where I land on that and what we should do. So there's just different types of it. Strip grazing, creep grazing. I'm actually never heard of that one. Forward grazing, never heard of that one either. But you can look at the work of people like Joel Salatin. He's really big on that. Greg Judy, he's got a great YouTube channel. Check out these people and see what they're doing. They're doing amazing things, not just with cattle, but also with pigs and chickens and ducks. And they're producing extremely high quality food. Okay, so these are the different examples that we have of ways that we can work with the land, be profitable in the sense of producing foodstuffs, producing products that could basically be sold or traded. And then let's look at some of this other stuff that I pulled up. And then I'll probably end this video and we can talk more. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about is black soldier fly. And this is really cool because, you know, the transition from the old society to the new society is not going to happen like a flick of the wrist. It's not going to happen super quick. One of the cool things about these things called black soldier fly, I know some of you are probably like heaving right now, but this is really cool because this is an insect that can turn food waste into food for animals. So pigs and chickens, they consume a lot of grain to produce eggs and to produce meat. The cool thing with cows and ruminants in general is that they can produce food simply by eating grass, something that we can't consume. They turn cellulose into flesh. So that's really cool. But if we want to diversify, if we want to raise pigs, chickens, fish, ducks, things like that, we would usually need some form of grain or protein source. Grain is usually the go-to, but like I said earlier, there's issues with monocropping. So we want to find at least some substitutes. Now, I've heard some people say that you can't completely substitute with other things like these black soldier flies, but it's a great start. And the cool thing is that you can take the waste from the wasteful civilization that we have right now. So this could be food waste from restaurants, it could be old grease, this can be horse manure, this can be all the stuff that they throw into the garbage and garbage dump. These creatures, these insects can eat it and highly efficiently convert it into a food for chickens, pigs, fish, and other animals that then we want to eat. So I love the idea of taking the waste from our wasteful society and turning it into something useful and outputting something profitable, but also good for the environment and good for people. So another thing that's really cool is the composting worm. So they're not as good at converting material, but they can produce a compost that's really good for them growing crops. So if you want to grow some corn, if you want to grow some, vegetables, if you want to grow some wheat, whatever it is, my experience is that the composting worm is amazing, and the vermicompost, the compost that they make, is amazing. So you can take waste products from the wasteful society that we're trying to move away from, and we can turn it into compost. We can turn it into food for our animals that we can then just eat or sell, and we can do amazing things with this waste. So just to sum up what this video is about, if we really want to have a parallel society, if we really want to move away, we got to take care of our water, we got to take care of our soil, we have to produce food, we have to have community, right? So I talked about that ideal size. I talked about finding that watershed piece of land where we can really control the water. And if we do that, we could be successful in the long term. And I see small pockets. My vision of the future is small pockets of people doing this all around, right? You could do it in California, you could do it in Texas, you could do it in Alabama, you could do it in Canada, you could do it in South America, you could do it in Africa. And if you get enough people who are in these communities, not shutting themselves away, but being sustainable, being self-contained, then when the next COVID happens, when the supply chain breaks down, when the politicians want to try to indoctrinate your kids, whatever, you have a community to turn to. You don't need the politician to do something for you. They're going to start coming to us and asking what they can do for us because we don't need them, right? So they have to justify themselves. So the best way to do that is to produce your own, have your own community, be closely knit, be healthy. In future videos, I'm going to talk about what we can do to be healthy. Maybe I should end this video on just like worms. They're beautiful terraces. How about that? What we can do to create parallel education, to create parallel community, to create parallel communication. I have an idea for a social media app that solves the problem of social media apps, right? I'll talk about that in a later video. Thank you for watching. If you're interested, please subscribe, please like, please share, please comment. I want to hear from you. I want us to create a community, and it's through community that we can create change. It's hard to do things individually. We can do things individually, but it's harder. We have other people like mine. We can really take on some huge projects and create that parallel society that is healthy, that does allow for people to be successful, but also gives us that community, gives us that support that we need. I really believe we can have our cake and eat it too. This isn't left versus right. This is what is best for human beings, what is best for the individual, what is best for families. I'm doing this because I have a family, I love them. I'm sure you do too, and I want the best for them. And politicians are failing us. The politicians are failing us. The systems in place have been corrupted. And instead of a violent revolution, we just need to walk away. We just need to walk away and do our own thing. And then they'll come to our table, and then they'll ask us what they can do for us, which is how it should have been the entire time. So I'm going to stop now. Again, please like, comment, subscribe, all that. And we will talk in the future. All right. Thank you.